Metroid Other M is the worst thing to come from Nintendo since the Philips CDI collaboration. It takes everything good about the Metroid series and defiles it. It's possibly one of the worst games ever made, and for sure one of the worst Wii games. This is the same platform with hits such as M&M Kart Racing and Imagine Party Babies, so that's really saying something. My brain is incapable of comprehending how such a game was released. I can only imagine someone at Nintendo woke up one day and went to take a morning dump and found this instead and said, maybe I can make a few bucks selling this. There's really no other explanation that makes sense. Did anyone really want a story-based Metroid game about Samus's feelings? I'm not saying that Metroid should have no story, but I think they managed it in the other games to have just the right amount of story. It's especially confusing that all of this came from Nintendo. Nintendo, the company that not only avoids trying to make story-based games, but the company that will delay games however long they need to make sure the game is good, and will cancel it if they don't like where it's going. Well, apparently this one they just said, fuck it, who cares about Metroid, let's just push this turd out. I'd go as far as to say this is the game that marks the point of Nintendo no longer caring about the quality of their games and just caring about making a quick buck. But why am I talking about all this now when the game came out 5 years ago? Well, because this piece of shit killed what may have been my favorite game franchise and I'm still butthurt about it. I want to make sure that no one else ever has to suffer through this game. Also because I've got nothing else to do with my time aside from complain about video games and watch Chinese girl cartoons. If you haven't played the game and are thinking of playing it yourself, don't. Please don't. If you really want to experience it, just watch a long play of it. All the footage from this review is actually from a long play done by Suno. I did play through the game a few years ago, and I couldn't stomach the thought of doing it again. Just watching through the footage made me feel sick. I'm going to take a moment to plug the long play here, and thank Suno for taking one for the team, playing this game and recording the whole thing through. Hopefully your sacrifice will be worth it, and no one else will ever have to touch the game again. I'm going to put a link to the video in the description, and if I can figure out how to do annotations, I'll put one right here. Now originally, I went into this game with pretty high hopes for it. I didn't look at any reviews beforehand because I wanted it to be a completely fresh experience. To be fair, I did overhype myself because I was sure it'd be good because it was a Metroid game. Even though there were tons of red flags leading up to it. The original E3 trailer seemed kinda weird. It looked like it was a heavily story-based game, and there was a third party involved. I figured they were trying something new with it, and Team Ninja did a pretty good job on Ninja Gaiden, so how bad could the game be? Oh, how naive and foolish I was. Well, let's get cracking. I'm probably going to spend most of this video going over the full story of the game. I know generally story is not the main aspect you should focus on when going over a game, but they were very clearly proud of their story and wanted this to be a story-heavy game. You can't skip any cutscenes the first time through, and beating the game unlocks Metroid Other M the movie, which is all the cutscenes mixed together into a 2-hour movie. So I'll be going through that, and I'll bring up my thoughts on the other elements of the game as I go through it. But let me start by saying that even without the atrocious story, this game would still be pretty bad, just not nearly as bad. The story manages to make the game far worse than if they had just put no story at all. But before we can start, we have the game's title, Other M. What kind of name is Other M anyway? It should clearly be called Metroid Mother due to the heavy-handed symbolism and themes throughout the game. My theory is that someone in Nintendo remembered they once had a series with the same name, and people would be upset and confused if they called their new game Metroid Mother. So instead they changed the name so that they can focus only on upsetting Metroid fans. Thanks for that, guys. So we start off and oh look, it's Super Metroid, the best game in the series. Now, I don't have too much against this scene, aside from the fact that it feels like they're trying to win brownie points by calling back Super Metroid. Mother Brain looks pretty good though. It's a fairly promising start to the game. They did change the way the Metroid dies slightly. Instead of flying away and coming back for one last attack, it just blows up right where it is. But even that isn't really a huge issue. They otherwise did a fine job until Samus opens up her mouth and ruins it.
Time to go.
Really? That's the best you can come up with? Where is she going? To hell? Maybe she just wants the Mother Brain to go away so she can morph into a ball and cry for a bit. Before we go any further, I want to take a quick moment to explain the timeline of the series. Knowing the timeline and where Other M falls into it is important to explain some of the issues this game has. The series starts with Metroid and its remake Metroid Zero Mission. Then come all the Prime games, but apparently those were removed from the canon. Metroid 2 comes next, then Super Metroid. Then Other M fits in right between it and Metroid Fusion. So keep in mind this is the second to last game in the timeline. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, back to the story. we're treated to Samus lying around in her Zero suit. I know a lot of people have issues with the Zero suit, but honestly it doesn't bother me that much. Only thing I have issue with is Samus should only be seen outside of her suit after beating the game in a fast time, death, or in the case of Zero Mission, the best game in the series, during forced stealth sections. By the way, if you were ever curious about how Samus puts her suit on and takes it off, apparently she's able to will it on and off like magic. Now begins the tutorial. I'm generally fine with explaining how to play a game, but it feels out of place here. All three of the Prime games have tutorial-like segments, but they are integrated into the game itself. Here they have you standing in a room being told everything you can do. It's especially strange because they remind you constantly how to do simple things later in the game. I know Nintendo wants everyone to be able to enjoy their games, but they really should have let you turn off those notifications. This tutorial really serves one main purpose that isn't regurgitated to you later in the game, and that's telling you how to use power bombs. This is important, remember this. This is a good spot to talk about the gameplay. It has problems. Oftentimes the game feels like it's playing itself, as Samus auto-aims onto enemies and you can dodge anything just by pressing a direction at the right time. Not only do you dodge the attack, but you also get an instant charge beam out of it, so most of the game is just spent mashing the control pad and shot button to kill everything. Now this is the first time they've tried to make a 3D Metroid game that wasn't a first-person shooter, but they could have done something better with it. Perhaps if you had to press a separate button to dodge instead of the thing you're already moving around with, and if you had to actually manually lock onto enemies, then it'd be a little bit better. By the way, the entire game is played with only a sideways Wiimote because apparently they thought some people didn't own a nunchuck. So they had to condense their buttons and also force you to move around a 3D plane with only a control pad. There actually is a first-person mode where you can point at the screen and aim around, but because the whole game is played with the Wiimote on its side, it's cumbersome to switch between third and first person. The only way to use missiles now is to lock on while in first-person mode. They don't have much use, but you also don't have to worry at all about running out because of concentration. Concentration is something you can do at any time to recharge your missiles. Yes, that's right. You don't have to concern yourself with any sort of ammo management. At any given time, you can just stop and point your gun into the air and get all your missiles back. It will also heal you if you're at low health, so you don't have to worry about that either. The backtracking, which is the meat of most Metroid games, is also made annoying due to the constant mini-boss type enemies that show up. Instead of making a larger or more interesting map, they just pad it by randomly locking the doors and forcing you to jump around shooting at a monster until you can bring it down to low enough health that you can do an execution and finally move on. Okay, tutorial's done, time for more story. We're right at the end of Super Metroid, after Samus has flown away from the exploding planet, and Samus is sad. The Metroid is dead, and apparently this is the worst thing ever. Even though Samus was completely willing to give the damn thing to the Federation several hours earlier so they can research it. But remember that part where it saved her? They really bonded with each other. I'm probably being a little hard on it, but it becomes aggravating to hear Samus say the baby over and over again. Just for fun, here's every time she says baby in the game.
The baby. By the baby. And the baby gave me. None of the baby to the baby. Babies cry. Urgency of a baby cry. Babies cry. The baby was the baby. The baby. But that baby earlier. I remembered the baby.
So Samus is cruising around in her ship when she gets a distress signal called a baby's cry. Real subtle there. She tracks down the signal to the also subtly named Bottle Ship, and our horrible train wreck begins. The Bottle Ship is a space station with separate isolated sectors that mimic different planet types. If you're familiar with the series, you'll recognize it as being the same type of setting as Metroid Fusion, the best game in the series. But they couldn't be asked to come up with 6 new areas. Hell, they can only manage to rehash 3, sectors 2, 3, and 5. Now it's time to actually play the game, and the first thing they do is introduce you to the lovely first-person pixel hunts. Instead of taking a note from Metroid Prime, the best game in the series, and having to look around to scan stuff normally as you explore, the game will stop you and force you to look around for what it wants you to look at so you can then advance the plot. It's much more frustrating than it sounds. Oftentimes what you're supposed to look for is something incredibly small until Samus zooms in on it. Hence, Pixel Hunt. So Samus discovers that the Federation is on the ship, and shortly after encounters them, along with her old buddy Judge Doom.
Remember me, Eddie?
She also meets up with Adam, the most important man in the universe, and discovers that he is leading the group. Oh, and there are also some random dudes who only exist to be killed off one by one. The game explains that Samus used to be part of the Federation and was under Adam's command, but left due to a disagreement. Despite this, she seems to hold him in incredibly high regard. This is a good time to discuss characters. The fact that the game even has a cast of characters beyond Samus and some of the monsters is a bit of a departure from the rest of the series, except if you consider Metroid Prime 3 the best game in the series, as that had a bunch of characters for Samus to interact with. It's also worth noting that that was the last game in the series to be released before this one. That aside, Samus is usually isolated, just her and the monsters of whatever horrible planet she's on. Here they increased the size of the cast to a whopping 6 people. Adam, Anthony, 2 survivors who work on the station, some old guy who shows up at the end of the game, and a group of pointless Federation troopers that barely make up one character when combined together. There's very little done to make you give a damn about any of the troopers. Each one has maybe 1 or 2 lines and that's it. They could have not bothered giving them names or having them even open up their helmets, and there'd be no effect on the game whatsoever. Samus decides that missiles and bombs aren't cool anymore, and so she won't use them until Adam says it's okay to. Oh geez, I sure wish I had some missiles right about now. Samus meets back up with Cool and the gang, and one of them unloads their entire magazine into a tiny bug. But then a bunch more bugs show up and form themselves into a Zelda boss. Nothing seems to work on it, so Adam authorizes everyone to use their freeze guns and tells Samus to use her damn missiles already. Apparently freeze guns doesn't include Samus' ice beam, as she doesn't activate it. So through the power of teamwork they kill the monster, even though Samus could have just used her ice beam and missiles and done it herself without the help of the useless troopers. Adam decides his team sucks and Samus should help, but because he's a complete tsundere while also having control issues, he demands that she follow his rules and obey his commands. Then Samus has a flashback to one of the game's stupidest scenes. Apparently in the Federation, everyone is supposed to give a thumbs up after a mission briefing, but Samus is such a rebel that she gives a thumbs down instead. What kind of fucking joke is this Federation anyway? Thumbs up? Are they movie critics now? And if the thumbs up is meant to signify that you understand your mission, wouldn't a thumbs down say, "Hey, can you run that by me again? I didn't quite understand." It's a wonder no one ever took her aside and told her to cut that shit out because she's confusing everyone. It's also explained here that Samus sees Adam as some sort of father figure, as the father she never had. This is supposed to be the rationale behind most of her actions and the rest of the game. So the team splits up to search for clues, but apparently everyone's comm systems aren't working. So no one has to take orders from Adam. Hooray! Except Samus, because apparently her comm systems still work. Damn it. Adam decides he's going to stay in a comfy booth and watch everything Samus does and decide what she can use and when. He authorizes normal bombs and says he'll slowly give her everything else back, but has no plan to ever let her use power bombs because they're too dangerous. This mention of power bombs and the one in the tutorial are really important because they never mention them again. But you better remember that you have them because it's going to bite you in the ass later if you don't. Now I'm going to pause the story for a moment and explain one of the biggest issues I have with both the game's progression and its story. Apparently Nintendo got tired of people making jokes about Samus losing all her power-ups after each game, so they decided that she'll technically have all her power-ups, but will only use them as they become authorized. But between Samus showing up at the station and talking to Adam, the only things she seems to have are bombs and missiles. Why didn't she come in with all her abilities before seeing Adam? Did she see the ship and go, "Uh-oh, Adam's here, better not use my plasma beam"? Also, several of her powers have no reason not to be active, like the various suit or the gravity suit. The main reason given for not allowing her to use abilities is because it might cause collateral damage, but how does a various suit cause any problems? I can buy power bombs, but everything else seems silly. But even beyond the story-based problems, it really breaks the game's flow because it's no longer about finding items, but just finding the situation where Adam says, "Hey, you can use your item now." It leads to a lot of frustrating moments. You find somewhere where you could progress if you had an item, but you know you don't have the item. So what do? Well, the correct response now is to just try to do it anyway, and Adam will let you use the item. Exploration is now also limited to just finding energy tanks, missiles, and the occasional bathroom treat. There's not even much reason to have more missiles in the first place since you can just regenerate them, but they had to put something to collect or it just wouldn't be Metroid. Also, killing everything in a room will cause a dot to show up pinpointing the exact location of an item, so you don't even have to look around that much. So Samus heads off to Sector 1 at this point. This is probably the best part of the game. It's still early enough that everything hasn't sank in yet, and you get to run around and explore for a little bit without being stopped too often for story breaks. While exploring, Samus encounters a chicken monster. Aw, isn't it adorable? She decides against shooting it even though she has a bad feeling about it. There's nothing inherently wrong about this part, but the chicken will be significant later, so I need to mention it. More exploring. These hologram things are kinda cool, but they seem like they just cause problems for this environment. Anything you tried to keep in here would just keep slamming its face into the wall, thinking there's more space to roam around than there really is. It's like they really didn't want their game to be confined to a small spaceship. Samus also finds a brand new item here. When the game was first coming around, they hinted that there'd be new items that weren't in the other games in the series. Turns out there's only 2 of them. This one makes the charge beam spread outward when it hits an enemy, making things even easier, and the other one lets you multi-target with missiles. Samus kills a boss and finds the chicken again. It's eating a dead monster, and Samus makes a note that the creature used her to feed on its prey because it's too weak to get by on its own. She calls it a disgusting creature, but because it's a story sequence, still decides not to shoot it, even though she's been killing everything in her path before now. Maybe it's because she's thinking of it like the baby. Frankly, I think they should have given her a better reason to not kill it yet, because the fact that she doesn't kill it winds up being very important later on. Here's a fun part. You have to hop onto a thing and shoot things while hanging onto it, and if you fall off you have to run all the way back and do it again. I timed it and it's about 30 seconds both ways. Whee! I'm having so much fun right now. Whenever you enter an area where there might be friendlies, Samus slows down to a crawl and walks around like this. At this point they may as well just start the cutscene instead of dragging it out. So story stuff is happening again. Samus finds out that the bottle ship is designed to create bioweapons, and she gets really upset about it. The Federation is creating bioweapons? How could this be? She also learns about Madeline Bergman, who becomes an important character later. Oh no, Samus, watch out for that giant lizard. Here's one of the worst fights in the game. It's a first-person fight where you just aim towards the tail and fire missiles at it. It somehow manages to be both incredibly dull and incredibly frustrating at the same time. The giant lizard runs away and the crew finds one of their comrades is dead. At this point you go into first person and have to look at something to continue. You would assume it's the corpse, but nope, you have to turn all the way around and look at some green goop. Oh look, it's that little chicken from before. Now I just feel dumb for not shooting it when I had the chance. A mere 10 minutes after asking if Adam knew about the bioweapons, she asks herself again if Adam knew about the bioweapons. So Samus heads to Sector 3, and Adam says to search for areas with your current equipment, and he'll decide to let you use the other stuff as he sees fit. Hey Adam, can I use my Variosuit now? No? Okay, I guess I'll just look for non-hot areas. Not even 2 minutes later, and Samus has no options but to go into a volcanic area and slowly die from heat. And yet Adam still decides not to let her use the Variosuit. Normally in Metroid, if you walk into a room and your health starts to drain, you turn back unless you're trying to do a sequence break or playing a ROM hack. Yet here, where you're outright told to explore only where you can with your equipment, you're then supposed to go into an area that you would think you couldn't go into. Adam decides that your normal beam isn't cool enough, so he finally lets you use the ice beam, even though everyone else was using freeze guns well over an hour ago. But he still doesn't say, go ahead and take the Variosuit too, you probably need it. Finally, after several hell runs, Adam lets Samus use her Variosuit since he realizes she's going to be stuck in a boss fight. Remind me why Samus holds this guy in such high regard again? He was clearly willing to let her melt for no good reason. There was no reason to hold off letting her have it. It's not like Fusion where the Federation was trying to slow her progress and keep her under control. Adam's just a huge dick apparently. Samus proceeds a little further and finds out that she needs the grapple beam if she wants to continue. But Adam has already hit his power-up quota for the moment, so he tells her to forget about the lizard and sends her to Sector 2 so he can have a change of pace. Oh boy, I really wish I had a gravity suit right about now. So Samus manages to find a survivor and oh no, a forklift robot! Yes, this is the most creative boss in the game. This is what I think of when I think of Metroid. A forklift robot. Not much to say about the actual fight itself, it's just more of the same. Well, apparently the robot was being piloted by a ninja because he got away in an instant. Samus determines that there's a traitor in the group trying to kill everyone on the ship. This could be an interesting subplot if it was done in a better game, but here they managed to fuck it up at every step of the way. There's still no reason to care about any of these characters, so there's no real emotion behind them being killed off one by one. Also, why doesn't Samus ask about the fact that a Federation trooper just tried to kill her with a forklift robot? Doesn't Adam see everything that she sees? Oh well, no time to worry about that. It's time to go back to Sector 3 and kill the lizard monster that should have been dealt with earlier. Adam tells her she can use her plasma beam, but only if she encounters the monster, instead of just letting her use it now. Samus also decides to be overly dramatic and call the traitor the Deleter, which sounds like a 12-year-old's original character. The fact that they went through the effort to send an assassin instead of just blowing up the ship is also stupid, but they do at least try to explain the reasoning behind that later. Remember that ninja? Not only did he manage to escape the robot in an instant, but he managed to travel all the way to Sector 3 and kill another guy in about 3 minutes. At this point, they're well aware of how little these guys matter, as they don't even let you know which one of them just died. Samus heads for Sector 3, but gets locked in a box randomly and needs to be able to shoot through windows, so Adam gives Samus the wave beam. But still no plasma beam, even though he's expressed willingness to give it to her. Let me start by saying, fuck this part. Samus enters a room and sees Anthony is being attacked, but she can't reach him. What do you do? The correct answer is to log onto the grapple beam spot and wait for Adam to authorize the grapple beam. This is yet another example of how bad this authorizing crap is. In any other game, you would have found the grapple beam earlier, seen the spot, and put 2 and 2 together. Here, you don't have the grapple beam, so you're either not going to be thinking about it, or you're going to see the spot and say, oh, grapple beam, I don't have that yet, so the answer must be something else. I was actually stuck for a moment at this point when I first played the game, because I wasn't used to the dumb authorization system, and I thought there was some other way to get up to the monster or shoot it from where I was. The thing gets away and Samus has a flashback. Are you ready for more backstory? I know I am. So some guy's repairing a ship, and then it has a meltdown and begins to explode. Samus begs Adam to send her in so she can save the guy, who's Adam's brother, but Adam instead orders that they detach the exploding part. It's a typical needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few scene. I suppose there's nothing incredibly wrong here, just it feels very cheap and cliched to me. Thankfully they end the scene before they can ruin it with Samus's thumbs down. At this point Samus decides she's had a long day and wants to relax with some extreme lava fishing. I haven't talked too much about the bosses up until now, and that's because most of them are incredibly forgettable. Anyway, Samus's grapple beam can now be used to yank a giant fish monster out of the lava. I'm pretty sure it doesn't work that way, but whatever. This is probably one of the only memorable original bosses in the game aside from the forklift robot, and it's only because of how out of place the whole fight feels in a Metroid game. Out of everything else in the game, this is the part that really sticks out to me as having been made by Team Ninja. Well, aside from the scenes where we see Samus's ass anyway. Right before a save point, you get stopped up by Adam. Why wouldn't they just wait for you to take the extra step before getting the call? You're forced to stop at all save points for map navigation. They lock the doors so you can't even go on until you do it, so why didn't they just mix the two things together? I know it's a small complaint, but it just baffles me. I still can't tell if these areas are supposed to be cool because they're inside a spaceship, or if they really wanted to use these environments and had to figure out a way to make it fit within the world. Samus proceeds onward and sees the corpse of the lizard she's been chasing, and enters the room. If you've ever talked to someone about Other M, this is probably the main scene they've brought up. So Samus enters the room slowly and has a laser pointed at her, but it's just Anthony trying to fight some monster in the dark. Despite this immediate danger, Samus stops to calmly look for the exit she just came from, but it gets blown up. Anthony is ready to use his plasma cannon, but Samus tells him not to waste it and to leave it to her. She doesn't bother to turn on her plasma beam, even though she was told to do so a while ago. Adam even decides to let her use the super missiles now. By the way, super missiles are just a charged shot of normal missiles now. Can't have people worrying about two separate missile types. So the room is bright enough to see now, and oh no, it's Ridley! Samus is so terrified that she outright turns into a little girl before him. She proceeds to get taken for a ride and loses her suit, while Adam gets shot, presumably by the mysterious deleter. Things are looking bad for our heroes. Thankfully, Anthony's there to save the day. Samus then begs Anthony not to do it, even though there's nothing for him to do since his cannon hasn't recharged yet. He then gets knocked off and falls to his death. After witnessing the death of her friend, she finally decides to turn on her plasma beam and kill Ridley. Now I can kind of understand the angle they were going for with Samus being terrified. Going by the manga, Ridley was responsible for killing Samus's parents and generally fucking up her own life, so it makes sense for her to be traumatized by him. Except that the very same manga goes through the original Metroid, and she gets over her fears and defeats Ridley. Even outside the realm of the manga, she's already fought Ridley on no fewer than 4 occasions. But wait, the Prime games are apparently non-canon now. That still leaves at least 2 times she's killed him, but now she's outright shitting herself because the dragon that killed her parents is back, even though he's come back to life before, so that shouldn't even surprise her. I'm not saying she shouldn't be a little bit surprised, but to outright have a breakdown is just stupid. Maybe she's just afraid because she only has 30 missiles, and Ridley usually takes a shitload of them before he goes down. I'd be pretty worried too if this was any other game in the series. Which brings us back around to our boss fight. Because of the way the game is set up, there's no point to even bothering with missiles. Just keep shooting charged plasma beam shots. Normally your missiles are reserved for these sort of situations, since you can unload a lot of damage quickly, while charged shots are slow and are usually just reserved for saving your ammo. But here it takes so long to fire missiles while leaving you exposed that you're better just dodge and charge shot over and over again. Missiles really don't get much use in this game, and yet there's 70 of them to find when you can get by just by recharging the 10 you start with. Anyway, Samus defeats Ridley and we're treated to a Twin Snakes cutscene. She gets sad about Anthony for a moment but moves on. However, Adam seems to be missing. At about this point, Samus becomes lost and confused without someone telling her where to go and what to do at all times. Also, she surmises that Adam couldn't have been killed since he would have known about the traitor, even though she never mentioned anything about it. All she has to go by is the fact that Adam can supposedly see and hear everything she does, so he should have seen the guy in the forklift robot. But again, this makes the fact that he never said anything about it very fishy. She doesn't even consider that maybe he's the traitor. Samus gets out of the elevator and sees a Federation trooper walking around. After all the talk of a traitor and being worried about Adam, her first instinct is to slowly walk in his direction instead of running. It gives enough time for the elevator to go all the way down and come back up without her having to wait, but she could have just confronted him before he even went to the elevator. Samus proceeds to give chase, but reaches an area she can't get across. So she decides, since Adam doesn't seem to be watching anymore, she'll turn on her space jump and screw attack. Why didn't she just use space jump from the start? It would have made a lot of things easier. And why don't you just turn everything on except for your power bombs? Maybe she thinks Adam will be less angry if she only turns on what she absolutely needs. But why turn on the screw attack then? Time for a bunch of story. Samus encounters Madeline Bergman, but she runs away. Rather than trying to calm her down by telling her she's not going to hurt her, or turn off her magic suit, she runs over to her waving her gun arm around and scares the shit out of her. Then she gives off her speech. Oh boy, I sure hope she doesn't shoot me in the face. Madeline explains the Federation's brilliant plan was to try and weaponize space pirates. But then the space pirates became too self-aware. Samus doesn't trust her and starts doing some thinking and finally realizes that the Federation could have blown up the ship whenever they wanted to. Why didn't she realize that sooner? Mere moments later, it's revealed that the Federation was cloning Metroids to use as weapons. What a twist! If you've played Fusion, you'll remember the exact same thing happened there, and it just raises some issues. First off, they're being lazy and copying a plot point wholesale, but more importantly, this just makes everything in Fusion seem silly in contrast. When Samus finds the secret facility full of Metroids, it's less of a, oh my god, they're cloning Metroids, and more of a, oh geez, you guys, you're cloning Metroids again? Getting back to our exposition, Madeline also explains that there's a Mother Brain AI clone called MB, and now the game proceeds to kick you in the dick. Madeline explains that Metroids and MB are in a hidden area with no maps called Sector 0, which is modeled to be like Torian. At this point I had lost all hope in the game, but thought, well this game sucks, but hey, maybe it'll redeem itself. I get to go in an area that I can explore without it holding my hand, and fight some Metroids, and even a Mother Brain clone. I know it's all cheap callbacks, but I'll take anything. Well, I'll spoil it right now, you never get to go to Sector 0. Back to the plot, Samus determines the Federation wanted to kill everything in the facility but save the Metroids, so they send in the assassin. Samus trusts Adam so much that she doesn't even consider that he could be the assassin or could be hiding something from her. But then her entire world is rocked and she finds out that Adam was involved, but she doesn't really think anything of it. Samus tells Madeline to stay put and leaves her all alone. If you remember before this, Samus was following someone she thought was the killer, but seemed to forget all about it. So she leaves, and oh gee, I wonder what's going to happen. Oh no! It's the deleter! Samus enters an area where gravity is getting messed up, and she still doesn't turn on her gravity suit. She has no idea if Adam is the traitor or even still alive, so there's no reason outside of gameplay and progression to not have the suit now. If this was a normal game where you had to find it somewhere, I wouldn't think anything of it, but Samus has the suit on her and just has it turned off. The authorization system continues to make everything feel stupid. I thought Sector 0 wasn't on any of your maps. At this point, Other M is done with original bosses, and decides the rest of the bosses will just be fan service from the other games in the series. The first is the most memorable boss from Fusion, the Nightmare. But it seems more comical and less threatening than in Fusion. Encountering it at all just raises issues when you consider Fusion follows this game. Isn't the Nightmare a bioweapon? When she sees it in Fusion, she should probably figure, oh great, the Federation's still trying to make bioweapons, so there's probably Metroids here too. Also, still no gravity suit, even though it'd really help right now. So Samus takes down the Nightmare, and arrives at the entrance to Sector 0. She begins to walk slowly, so you know shit's about to go down. Oh no, a baby Metroid. After having some flashbacks to her baby Metroid, she decides to kill it, but gets shot in the back by a freeze pistol before she can do so. Apparently she's weak to ice now, as this is enough to completely fuck her up and shut her suit down. So Samus wakes up, and it turns out Adam was the one who shot her with the freeze pistol. He explains that he shot her because the Metroids in Sector 0 probably can't be frozen. Samus points out that Adam was able to freeze the little one, and Adam says that it was because it was a larva, but he also has no fucking clue whether they can or can't be frozen. Since he thinks they have no weaknesses, he decides that they can't be allowed to live. So how do you expect to kill them if they have no weakness? By the way, remember when Adam was supposedly shot right at the beginning of the Ridley battle? Yeah, that's never brought up again and never goes anywhere. They probably just forgot about it. Adam also explains that the only reason his name showed up earlier was because he wrote a report saying Metroids were bad and shouldn't be used as weapons, but someone repurposed his report for nefarious purposes. How convenient. Adam's plan to deal with the Metroids is to activate the self-destruct, which he thinks will wipe them all out. The same Metroids that apparently have no weakness. Samus begs Adam to let her go instead, calling back to the scene from earlier, but Adam says he can't fight Ridley, so he'd rather sacrifice himself to kill the Metroids and save her. Why couldn't he just let Samus go in there, enable the self-destruct, and then escape like she always does? She's pretty good at that sort of thing, remember? Why does the Metroid sector even need to be destroyed right now? Shouldn't they finish taking care of all the other pressing business first, then blow the whole station up? What if Adam fails to start the self-destruct sequence before he gets killed by Metroid and dies for no good reason, while leaving the area locked off? Nothing makes sense. Now how do we top off our scene that's supposed to be emotional? Oh, I know. Let's use Samus's stupid fucking thumbs down thing. So now Adam's dead and Samus feels sad.
My best friend.
My best friend? Wasn't Adam your father figure and Anthony was your friend? Hey, remember Anthony? Apparently Samus doesn't remember Anthony anymore. So finally, after all she's been through, after all the water areas and gravity areas, when Samus is about to be sucked into the vacuum of space, she decides to enable her fucking gravity suit. Also, by the way, they decided that the Various suit is Samus's iconic appearance, so gravity is just a purple aura that shows up when you're in gravity areas. Oh no, the Nightmare's still alive. Good thing you have that gravity suit now, and it's dead. You know you've got a problem when you have to keep reminding the player about the new item they just got. Samus finds the last Marine, James, but he's dead. She doesn't seem to think too much of it. Now if you paid attention to all the stupid and useless Marines, James was the most likely one to be the assassin, since everyone else was confirmed dead by this point. By pure process of elimination, Samus should know that it's either James or KG, since she didn't see KG being pushed into the lava, so for all she knows he might still be alive. But at this point, she doesn't seem to care about that subplot anymore, and neither does the game. As far as she's concerned, now that Adam is dead, all the deleter nonsense doesn't matter anymore, because no one else matters but Adam. She continues on, and oh look, Ridley's dead. Samus wasn't even needed to finish him off. I bet Adam feels real stupid right about now. Since Ridley is dead, Samus can focus on finding survivors, so she finds one, but there's a rumbling. Oh no, it's a Queen Metroid, from Metroid 2, the best game in the series. This is the game's final story boss, by the way, a random Queen Metroid out of nowhere. There is one more boss later, but it's more of a bonus fight that is even more out of nowhere. The fight itself is pretty lame. It just spawns a bunch of Metroids until you do enough damage, then it sprouts crystals and shoots laser beams at you. After taking it down far enough, we have the stupid finish to the boss fight. Samus uses the grapple beam to grapple into the mouth and into the Queen Metroid. You're automatically set to 2 energy tanks regardless of how many you have, and your health is rapidly draining. What do you do? The correct answer is to use a power bomb. Yeah, remember those? The things that you've had the whole time but you didn't really have because you were never allowed to use them? Apparently Samus activated them without saying anything and you can use them now. Nothing letting you know you have them again, no reason for you to think about using them aside from the fact that there's nothing else you can do in ball form aside from lay bombs. I would have accepted it if they were usable the whole time but gave you an instant game over if you used them anywhere else, kinda like a Dominus thing. But no, you've got to remember that you have them the whole game and then just try to use them right here. Either way, the boss is now dead and we can enjoy more story. Samus chases down the survivor, and again doesn't bother to try to calm her down by turning off her suit. The previous scenes have even made it seem like she can turn the individual parts on and off, so she could have just turned off her gun arm if she didn't want to stand around in her Zero suit. I like how Samus just stands here for a while trying to think of what to say. So the survivor turns out to be the real Madeline Bergman, and the girl from before was MB, the mother brain AI that they needed to control the Metroids. Yeah, they decided that they needed her to be a young girl instead of a brain in a jar. Apparently it's because the Metroid needs to see a living thing as its mother when it hatches. So why not make it look like a giant Metroid? Do all Metroids have to see pretty blonde girls as their mother or they'll be confused? But if that's the case, why would the Metroid from before think Samus was its mother? Samus looks more like a robot than a blonde girl when she's in her suit. Also, it turns out MB is strong enough that she can throw people around a room. Man, I knew we should have just used a brain in a jar. MB shows up with Freeze Pistol, Samus's greatest weakness, and threatens the two. MB proceeds to become Wesker for a moment, but ends up frozen, and the Galactic Federation shows up. Why didn't you just send in all these guys from the start instead of bothering with Adam's little team? MB thaws out and uses her crazy psychic powers to wake up a bunch of beetles and other enemies. Why don't these guys have lasers anymore? The Federation sure has fallen on hard times since Prime 3. So now we're at our finale where you're forced into first-person shooter mode. Time to kill all these monsters by standing around shooting at them. Except no, all you have to do is log on to MB and the cutscene will start. Madeline shoots MB with her freeze pistol and the Federation shoots at her while she's frozen. They're pretty awful shots too, since all the shots just seem to graze her, but it's enough to put her down. Apparently without MB, all the beetles decide to stop what they're doing and go back to sleep. Some old guy shows up and starts acting like a dick to Samus. It really makes you wonder why she cooperates with the Federation in the next game, Fusion. Oh look, Anthony's alive, and he saves the day. It's a good thing he's always around to save Samus. I don't know what she'd do without him. So they all leave in Samus's ship, and she thinks to herself what would have happened if none of them had gone there. When her first thought isn't Adam would still be alive right now, you would think she finally got over him, but then she goes right back to pining for him. Oh look, Samus is giving a thumbs up now. Character development. The end. Except no, we're not done yet. After the credits are done, we cut to sometime later. The Federation has decided to destroy the bottle ship, but Samus wants to go back and get something she forgot before they destroy it. So for the most part, this just serves as an excuse to go back through the map and collect all the items you missed, with the added ability to use power bombs now. Sure can't wait to gather up all those useless missiles. At any point, once you're done collecting everything, or you've gotten tired of playing, you can proceed to the glowing marker on the map. Samus enters a room and oh look, it's Phantoon, the ghost of the wrecked ship. Apparently he just likes to haunt any old ship now. If this game took place before Super Metroid, I would assume that the wrecked ship was actually the crashed bottle ship. But nope, Phantoon's just a space ghost that likes to show up at random. There's not really much to say about the boss fight itself, you just kind of stand there and shoot wave beam shots at him. But anyway, now the fight's over, and we finally reach the end of all of this. Samus arrives at her final destination, the control room where Adam spent most of the game chilling while observing Samus. She finds the one thing that could never be replaced, Adam's helmet. Really? Why the fuck did he not take it with him when he was going into Sector 0? They show a cutscene of him grabbing two guns and then running off while leaving his helmet, but was he really in that much of a rush that he couldn't strap one of the guns to his back and take his helmet with him? He even shows up with one on his back later anyway. That helmet probably would have been helpful to prolong his death when dealing with, Metroids. Beyond that, the significance of the helmet seems pretty dumb. I mean, I know it's supposed to be sentimental because it's the only thing she has to remember Adam by, but it just seems like a standard issue Federation helmet to me. Oh, but wait, it gets worse. Samus decides she needs to take off her suit when she's dealing with this helmet. Oh no, the self-destruct sequence has been activated, because all Metroid games need to have an escape sequence. They've got enough time to do one more stupid thing, and boy do they do it. As the self-destruct sequence starts, Samus decides she's not going to bother turning her suit back on and just runs out in her Zero suit. This is the same suit that she can magically turn on and off at will. The suit that contains a plasma beam to kill anything in her way, a speed booster to run fast, space jump to fly through the air, and gravity suit to deal with any breaches in the hull. What would she have done if she was running along and part of the hull was blown open? Oh whoops, guess I'm dead. What if she had to encounter something that she needed to kill with something more than her dinky paralyzing pistol? See, in Zero Mission, the Zero suit part somewhat makes sense. She left the planet, she was in her ship, she decided to take off her suit, but then she got shot down, and they hadn't established that she can turn the thing on and off whenever she wanted to. So she had to sneak around and make the best of it. Here it's just stupid. When she finally gets back into her ship, you can see it's clearly designed for a big clunky gun arm to fit into the slot. Anyway, Samus flies off and the game is finally over. I have to wonder why the credits showed up earlier instead of just waiting to show them here. They probably tacked this part on later because they realized they should have a section for the player to collect missing items and have some sort of escape sequence. The important thing is that it's finally over. Now that we're done with all that, here's a few more thoughts I had that I couldn't find a good time to bring up. The soundtrack of the game is completely forgettable. The few memorable songs are just ones they pulled from other games, just like the bosses. Everything else is just soft ambience. The other games manage to combine ambience with memorable melodies, but you'll get none of that here. I had to check a few times when I first played to make sure the music was even on because I couldn't tell there was anything outside of the battle music, which just felt like rejected Metroid Prime music. On the note of the soundtrack, it contains a good example of my issues with both this game and Samus' character in it. Both Super Metroid and Other M have theme songs for Samus. Here's Super Metroid's theme of Samus Aran, Galactic Warrior. Isn't it great? It's the theme song of a galactic triumphant warrior. And now, here's Other M's theme of Samus. It's not really a bad song in itself, but as a theme song for Samus? Apparently Samus' most defining character trait now is her being sad over Adam. I could probably go into graphics and art design and how there's problems with it, but after everything it becomes a giant blur. I'm honestly not sure if I'm okay with it or if I have a lot of problems. What I can say is that most of the things that are taken from other games look horribly off, and everything that isn't just feels like it clashes with the rest of the series. The Mother Brains and the Metroids look alright though. Kinda feels like they put more effort into that intro scene than anything else. There's a big question I'm sure some people are wondering. If this game wasn't a Metroid game, would it have been nearly as bad? It's hard to say. There would still be a fair deal of issues with the gameplay and the story is insulting any way you look at it, but there's the possibility it would be a little less insulting. Things like the soundtrack and graphics are incredibly average but passable. Overall, it would be the kind of game that comes out, gets mediocre scores across the board, and winds up in a bargain bin after a month. To sum everything up, this game is balls. Just like Metroid Prime Pinball, the best game in the series. It's really hard to pinpoint exactly who is to blame for why this game is so bad. I could point fingers, but I think everyone who worked on the game is partially to blame for letting it happen. It's sad, really. I used to love the Metroid series. If someone asked me to name a series with no bad entries, I'd shout Metroid without having to think anything about it. It's not like Other M went back and undid all the past games, but it's like finding out that your favorite Hollywood actor is a child molester. You can still go back and watch them in their old films and enjoy it, but you'll always end up thinking about what became of them. Other M is like that. They clearly haven't bothered to make another game since then, and there's no telling if they ever will. Maybe in another few years they'll release a Metroid collection or something. Every year now when E3 rolls around, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat in a combination of hopeful anticipation and dreadful fear. In some ways, I'm glad that Nintendo seems to have silently shelved the series. I'd rather it die with a whimper than see more games like this come around. It's to the point nowadays that when I'm asked about what my favorite series is, I usually just respond with Castlevania. I mean, it's pretty much the same as the Metroid games used to be. And I mean, it's not like they made a modern 3D story-based game that ruined the entire series. Oh.